not pointing fingers like, oh, look, it went done. It was scoped this way based on sales, the client, the manager. It's different every time. It's no one's point. But people would sit back and go, oh, well, I was involved in that, and that's what we did at a job over here, and they take it personal. There's nothing personal in the information. You have to look at it, or I look at it as, it's a global community. We're all coming together as a whole around the globe, viewing these videos, learning to do things better, and identifying, I see this value, this is my result that I get, was it what I really thought it was gonna be? So if they understand the overall value of what happened, they can be better prepared for, as a customer, dealing with the company that they're hired to consult, what they need done, and the consultant teams being able to willing to go to them and say, adjust the correct or adjust what they need and advise them to get a better product. I found it kind of unique because in no other industry have I observed a level in consulting that the consulting companies were so willing to always just say, okay, yes, whatever you want, whatever you need. Everyone was very afraid to push back. And that's just been a thing throughout all of consulting, everywhere you look within information security. So the clients often don't truly know or understand what they need. They just know that someone up top or some compliance said, we need this, so make it happen. And they just know they have this much that needs done. And the consultant teams or the consultant firms are very rarely guiding them and going, hey, let me help you out and show you how I can be more effective to make you secure, and then give them the tools they need to present for their upper management. And overall, I think that will improve our security. So that is the initial goal of the project, of the talk, and to merge that down into you as a pen tester or a hacker being able to deliver that regardless of what you were given. That, I think, gives you good, strong value in who you are. So, with no further ado, we will start the talk. Oh no, I broke it. See, that's what happens when I get a new toy. I click the wrong button, and things go crazy. See, I want to show you my lightsaber. I accidentally clicked to change the slide. Just so you know, obviously the theme is Star Wars because we're hackers, and I'll make sure that everyone's a nice Jedi. Yes, he will be rolling you some code at the end. That I said that was kind of the base of the talk originally because I have some stuff written that I wanted to give you. But I didn't want it to be just on code because so much of the industry or talking lately has lost what I felt it used to be in the early days of, DEF CON, pre-DEF CON 12, we'll say, era. Because at that time, the community was, hey guys, I've kind of done this. It somewhat works. It looks cool. Let me show it to you. Anyone want to help? And then it became, I'm not really going to present unless I'm dropping some elite O-Day. Look at me, how awesome I am. I own something that you're never going to use in the real world of pen testing. Great, that was really useful. So I wanted to bring it back a little bit of writing code that, it works, it does things I need, and I think you can work from it. So, that's where that portion rolled into. We're moving on. We're talking about scopes. Is a scope or a no scope better? And the answer is, as a pen tester, we always want no scope, no scope. because that's a real-world assessment. That shows you what the real adversaries might see. And yes, I agree. But there's also reasons for scopes. They are useful. Now, as a company, I would look at it saying, you know you need scope testing done. You also know you need it from a compliance standpoint. Do that. But then also go back and consider an entirely different test that is completely unscoped to get a broader view of a real-world scenario. Because a scope test is really based on a point-in-time assessment of this is what I was able to do from this environment today. It has nothing to even do with tomorrow. And we look at these scopes, and what do we see here? What do we see on the scope? First thing I see is 3 Class Bs and 3 Cs. Dude, that's 197, 364 IP addresses. And every IP address system has 65,535 ports. That's an insane number of systems. Now, they might not all have computers on them. They very rarely do. Can you test this in a week, honestly, and be effective? Do you feel that way? Probably not. And also, you're probably wondering, do I actually see this in the real world? Yes, I have. All of these figures that I'm doing are based on things that I've seen in the field since I've been doing pen testing at some point in time, at least more than once. So these are things that you actually do end up seeing. Now here, our testing and our numbers are a little unfavorable. I will fair them up later, because for sake of understanding it, we're gonna go from a very raw perspective of, let me just take Nmap and scan these systems on a basic Nmap scan, which only does 1,000 ports, and see how long that takes. Non-parallelized, this means one system, then go to the next, then go to the next. It can take, on my testing I just pull up Nmap, pick a random IP address I found. A lot of times I got up to around 70, almost 70 seconds per host to do a scan. Some hosts I found down to 20. We'll get into that. So that's 1,970 minutes. You can see the hours. And if I did this every day for 8 hours a day in a normal work day, it would take me 411 days just to do a scan of that assessment. That's kind of ridiculous. So now we're going to change it up and think about the real world, because we're not going to have all of these hosts are live. There's not 197,364 computers on that network. What I've generally found when you see scopes this large is about 20% of that is real. And that's on the high side when you're dealing with Class Bs. But generally on a scope, whatever the scope is, you get about 20% of it is live hosts. So we take that adjustment and we'll first scan, we'll take a medium for the scan time, saying we did 69 seconds, and the load times I got 20. Real world average of that's about half, so 205 days is what the real world perspective would be, scanning one host at a time for this range. Now, we'd be fair and sum that up and take the 20% of those hosts lives, and we're getting a lot better numbers now, because, well, we're only dealing with 39,472 hosts now, compared to 197,364 hosts. That sounds a little bit more realistic for a large environment. But there's another problem. If we take the sum of that, that leaves 39,000 hosts, as I said, 400, but it also leaves 157,892 dead systems, things that aren't even out there, just ambiguous IP addresses that I'm spending an average of 5.25 seconds to just ask the computer, hey, are you here? And I get no response going, hey, there's nothing there. That translates to 230 hours of completely wasted time. So you realize that it wouldn't even be feasible to actually produce a scan like that on a scope. So you can't do that. So we have to start thinking of solutions that aren't based on the general methodology or thought process of most people. Well, I sit on Nmap, I run a scan, I look at what's there, and then I go hacking. You'll never get anything done. So what do you do when this hits your desk? That's usually what I do.
You wear armor to work?
But it doesn't stop. You're like, say what? The way I look at this is, you get there, you go to work, and that was the scope that you were given, and this is inevitably what happens around about 30% of the time now. Client comes out, look, hey, we found these. They never hit the ROE, they didn't go in the statement of work. It becomes an issue. Sometimes it goes, well, just rolling through. We'll check back with the GRC team because it's for PCI. They've got to have it tested. We'll deal with it later. Just go ahead and roll it in. There's no need for you to have another flight, another hotel, reschedule on this. They have the acquiring bank down their back. They've got to get this done. Go ahead. Well, most places generally have no idea what's on their network. They really don't. So some network engineer just goes, hey, look, I got 3 more. They're kind of around these ranges. This will cover them, so here you go. Yeah, all right, buddy, now I have 393,966 hosts with 65,535 ports that we've only, at the times we looked at before, we only scanned 1,000 of those. So that's 64,535 possibilities of potential services that we don't even know exist. So how on earth do we make this sane? First, we do this again. You accept it, and you find a way to use the Force. But how? I mean, how are we going to solve that solution or find a solution for what we were just given? Well, if we carry down that rope, I look at it this way. I end up getting a little R2 robot. I put a hologram of your sister and beg Obi-Wan for help because there's no possible way it's going to happen. Because check out these numbers now. All right, checking out these numbers. Okay. We're now looking at 947 days of 8 hours a day of scanning. Just to look at this, over 1,000 ports. It's never going to happen. And Obi-Wan, as much as I love Obi-Wan, Darth Vader kills him. So, if you went ahead on your scanning this, we're talking about 900-something days. Wednesday comes, 1 p.m., you get a status call of, hey, how's things looking over there? You found anything yet? Yeah, we ain't found shit. We're still scanning. We don't even know if there's life on most of these planets that we're scanning yet. So we've looked at and seen what are some of the downfalls and pitfalls that come through, who's ever you're working with, like the client, and because a lot of times they're just managers, they're just trying to control their job. They know something needs done, and they're looking at you to get it done. They don't understand those timing principles that we looked at, and they just get a call from an engineering team, goes, hey, we found some other stuff, go ahead and put it in. I'm like, okay, great, and they hand you some numbers. You realize and see the numbers, and you go back to the Stormtrooper facepalm. So it's not really their fault in all the ways. It's a lot of effective communication, and I look at it saying, hey, go back to the your managers or who's ever scoping the calls and try to work with them on this so that they understand it as well. So hopefully they can push back to the client and they can narrow these things down. Maybe sometimes they can even do pre-scans for you. We talked about scanning these. Well, yeah, I'll talk about that later. So using the Force to make this happen, we can use parallelization. So these times are really based on on one host at a time scan. And nowadays, we do have parallelized scanning, multi-threading possibilities. And that is built in depending on how you use these softwares and things like Nmap to do that. But we also look at things like Nessus, which generally only run between a 12 and a 20 thread process. So that's only dropping your scan time down at maximum of 20%. That's still more days than you generally have. So let's look at this on a parallelized spectrum of scanning a class B here, one class, well, what is it? Okay, so, I forgot where I was at. All right, so yeah, we are doing general Nmap scanning here. Yeah. I should have been reading my speaker notes more than going off the top of my head. All right, so what are some of the things we lose when we do parallelized scanning? Because we're running on a time basis, things might time out, and it's going to continue running onto different hosts. So when you start picking up this many hosts quickly, things do get dropped. You might lose a few hosts that were there, but the percentage is very small. I'm just say if I picked 500 hosts, you scan it 5 times, you might miss 3 hosts first time, you might miss 5 the next time, you might miss 1 the next time as well. So it's very negligible, especially for the amount of time that we're seeing in an increase here. Now, you see, scanning this right here, per class B, so each one of these, we're looking at 8 hours, 1.35 days of work days. So we've really cut down. We've gone from hundreds of days to do this job down to 1.35. So we've taken this large scope and almost made it workable here. I mean, that's a long time to spend, but it's almost getting there. So this is how you start to mature and start to feel more like a Jedi in what you're doing here. So how did I solve this problem? How did I make this even better? So we get into 2 situations now, going to code that I've written that's available for you guys, and I'm going to use that in these demonstrations, but you can do it any way you choose. I've just written wrappers and stuff to manage how I want. So how do I create a managed workflow with all of those IP addresses? So I'm going to break the class B's down first. So I'm going to run Phase Blaster, and I'm going to do a BC conversion, and we're going to do it from a 10.10 network. And it's going to enumerate all of those down into class C's. And the reason we do that is because if we've had any problems or we have too many, we can just separate them out on the side. Let's focus on the environment in a little bit smaller perspective. The other thing we want to do is ask the client to help you understand what each segment does and identify the most useful ones to you. Say, what is really in this class B? What is in these class C's that I've broken down to? Let me find the most valuable portion of this block, and I can run just those to start with. We're going to still get to the others. We're going to still give them a look, but we're going to pay more attention to the value targets. This is getting value for your time again. Consider breaking them apart when you see that value position. Begin with the prime identified targets. That's basically it here. After you've continued through with that, you can go back and after you've done prime targets, you can go back to the ones that weren't so prime and just put them in the scanning in the background. You'll circle back to them later on, but you're going to be effective with what you had already. So let's continue looking at the ones that are going to be the most fruition. So we're going to tell Phase Blaster to go ahead and do a discovery of those only. So it's going to parallelize the ones that we broke out, the ones that we told it to, automatically. Then we're going to go and generate those into a Nessus. What happens when you do a Nessus? Well, there's another option in Phase Blaster to exclude IP addresses, because a lot of times you get big blocks like this, and they go, hey, these systems are really sensitive, they have problems, so don't scan them. And it's really, you can't just take that out. It's kind of hard to do. So if you put them in an exclude file and you generate that, it'll take all the hosts that were discovered out of that list and then put it in an Nessus file, which is all the hosts from that list that were not in the exclude list that you gave it. Go ahead and dump this over in Nessus. Okay, so that's scanning. import it, as I said, yeah, import it and go. So now we're going to start trying to find the droids that we're looking for. Offload everything to Nessus, and move on. Just let it go. After you get something like Nessus running, vulnerability scanners, you're not even going to look at it for a while. Just put it to the side. I have another task that I consider. Sammy, could you bring my bag? I forgot to bring this up. Offload tasks with things like Responder once a primary segment is identified. So if you identified something like the Windows environment where Responder is going to be something good for capturing hashes in the environment, well, this takes up a lot of ports in your system, like 445, which you need a lot. If it's using HTTP as well, it's going to take over 80 and 445. You often need these ports while you're pen testing. So I don't want my box having those ports taken up. So I came up with another solution for this problem. And I've spent some time building it, and I call it Pi Hack. So I take a little Raspberry Pi 3. Sometimes I carry 2. Like we talked about, we have some large networks and segment zones. What can we do with these? So these are designed to just run like Responder. These things take time, just like Nessus, and it runs for a long duration because you just want to keep cracking hashes. So just plug them in, put them there on the network, somewhere else, and continue working on your system, because now I continue looking at and attacking other services. Let's just look at identifying more services that we know are of advantage to us. There's tons of obscure ones, but we really want to look at what is just advantage to us. Nagios, HTTP, JBoss vulnerabilities, IIS services, VNC, SHU, you get it, you see it, the common stuff. We know our Pis are using some of these ports, so that would be a problem, but we've already offloaded that problem, and we continue working where we're at on our main system. Look for scanning for other ports that web services run. So go ahead and choose another piece of software, something like Masscan, and say, hey, these are common web ports. Just go ahead and scan and try to find those within the range. So you've built a second little portion from where you're working of things that are just of your interest. Now, using this as a tool collaboration. Our Nessus has been running probably for a couple hours now. A lot of times this is just for reports for the customer. Every now and then you find a few things off of it, but you don't spend too much of your time, and there's better things you can do with your time. So I would say just check it for criticals that you see, the things that really pop up in your eye that that you can exploit easily, that you see there. Just glance at it now and then. If it is something you haven't seen, go, oh yeah, let me take a look at it, grab that key, give it a shot. You don't see it, continue moving on. Check back into it, because this can be running for a while. About this time when you start going back, you might start getting some hashes from your Raspberry Pis. Go ahead and SSH over to them, grab those, send them to your crack box, get them cracking. At this time, you should have some other services identified you can look at. You've also found some web ones that will come out. I said to go ahead and do things like mass scan for web ports analysis, review them for what you want. Also, take the live ones and run them through something like Eyewitness, because this is another method or methodology we can use to narrow down what's out there to be effective. So it goes through all of the web applications we found and takes screenshots of the home page. That way you just look at it and go, oh, okay, that's a web application, that's an administration interface, that's just a web page. I'm on an internal pen test. I don't really have time to look through your web page, guess all those passwords, or do an application analysis. We just want the quick low-hanging fruit that might be there on these processes. So go ahead and start feeding those into Burp. And then begin guessing administrator credential login, admin, guess, admin password. See if anything default credentials that are laying around. So you see, we have taken what is almost impossible to just saying, what is the most common out of those, broke them down, and begin to actually have something that we can deliver effective with our time. The hardest thing about consulting as pen tester is time management and effectiveness in that time. So everything I'm looking for is how that I can create and design things and build things for you that will create an effective time deliverable for you and improve your client. That's why the pies were created. That's why some other code frameworks I've written have also been created. Now, I'd say now after that you've done this, you could also begin circling back to repeat this process with the remaining hosts that we started scanning again after we started the first host. But we started with the most advantageous all the way down. Now, there's something to consider. If you start doing this and scanning, you're going to make a lot of noise on the network. It's okay. Sometimes clients go, well, I caught you, so it's not valid. That's not true, man. We're trying to do what we would spend months on in hours or a couple days. Yes, you're going to see me. It's really loud. But if you want to, have some testing of your own ideas, I promise you can use something like this method with the pies, get DA within the week without ever running a single scan on a network. Think about the weaknesses in just the way products are designed to work. So if we capture credentials through SMB or LNT-LMR poisoning, we crack those, we log into their workstations, we drop clear text passwords, we look through their DC. We're doing everything as you're supposed to do. So unless you're looking really carefully, you're not going to get caught. Different ways of thinking of how you want to mature your process. It's all up to you. I like to go pretty noisy because I think it validates for me what the most possibility that I can present to the client so they can understand the most possible process. So creating managed workflow with Phase Blaster continued. We haven't actually even ran Nmap if you thought about it. After we started talking about improving our methodology as a tester, only thing we've done is discoveries, viewed web applications, captured hashes, and ran Nessus. We haven't even done any port scanning to check out what's going on. So we did a -D with Phase Blaster earlier, which just said, hey, discover all the hosts in my IP list and tell me what's out there. So defaultly, I can go back and say -FF, and it has a built-in feature where it just uses an Nmap aggressive scan -A and against all the live hosts. So, okay, anything that I found alive, go ahead and just give me a basic scan of 1,000 ports. Now, there is options to manually be much more granular in that, like -Nmap, and pass your own flags to produce a completely different scan result based on what you know. Because what about hosts that weren't designed to respond on a ping? You won't see them. This is where just experience comes in and understanding, hey, this is like a PCI zone that doesn't respond. I did some quick tests. I talked to the client. I need to use -PN for this segment. I mean, you've got to have some of your own due diligence. Not everything's automated in the world. But I think this will help you out. After it's done the scan, it pops back and it's finished. You can go back there and run it again and parse, --parse. And what that's going to do is say, okay, well, me, Phase Blaster, I went ahead and did my Nmap scan. I created all my XML outputs for you if you want to put them in MSF or Eyewitness. And then I saved all my results to another file. And those files are pretty garbled up with tons of banners and flags, service information that you don't need on a quick glance and a high-level overview of where am I going with this. So I can pass it -as parse. And all that does is it runs through that giant list and says, give me the IP address, give me the open ports and the service of that system. Bam. Right there in front of you saying, okay, I got 80, I got 22, I got 21. Whoa, why is 21 there? That shouldn't be there. It's another quick way for you to knock down through and start seeing. It's really about trying to get an understanding of what that environment is doing, what that system's purpose is. Because when you start to understand what the majority of the system's purpose is of the environment you're in, you can start to think in ways to attack them in an effective manner, not just, is there something vulnerable and go at it. Because many things of the vulnerabilities that you find that gain you privilege escalations in an environment are things that were designed to be there. You're just leveraging that. And I have no idea how fast that went, so I'm going to leave it to questions for you guys at this point. Yeah.
How often do you find that passive scans are equivalent to aggressive scans? Please repeat the question.
Yeah. Say the first part again.
How often do you find that passive scans are equivalent to the amount of information you get compared to aggressive scans?
How often are passive scans equivalent to the information from an aggressive scan? They're going to be much less. You're going to lose like versioning information. You're going to lose OS identifications. That really goes back to knowing the environment that you're in and what your end goal is, because you might try to be light on your presence because maybe you're doing a black hat assessment, or a black box assessment, full red team, and you don't want seen. That would be a good way to start identifying individual targets of interest without really popping many red flags. Then you can go spend some time, spread some time out, grab a different IP address, and go at it with a much more aggressive scan when you think you've identified a good system. So you can just do like an SV, a little bit more passively scanned version of Nmap, of find services, versus give me your OS, give me all your banner flags, everything you can. So there is an advantage and disadvantage. It just really depends on, I think, what you're looking for out of the end goal. If that answers your question. Yeah. Anybody else? No? Okay, keep going.
I've done some cadence. There's a lot of people out there that haven't actually done a lot of scanning. What would you suggest to newer people when it comes to slow walking attacks?
What do I suggest people do for newer people do for scanning on attacks to be less identified? They want to be more incognito.
Do you have any opinions on the information grabbed for it to be a slow walk attack?
What I would do is I would adjust the timing of the scan. If you're doing a larger segment, do some timing adjustments, make that, and randomize the agent. Just say you're coming from different areas, change your IP address halfway through. What you're going to do is you're going to break that scope up a lot more, and that's fine, and then adjust the timing between each scan. What that will do is that will just make your presence look more like a curious individual or a curious system out there. It might even just be some other random network admin running a few tests. What you'll be is less concerned to their SOC. And that's what you're looking for on more of a black box assessment. How will I be less identified and continually rotating where you're coming from? But I guess that's it. I'll be available after if anybody wants to talk or any further, anything that you might have missed in the slides that you want to go over, and me drinking lots of coffee, since this 36 hours of sleep is tons of fun at cons. Con fun. So thank you guys, and I really hope you enjoyed the talk.